queen of his gas machine. She has his heart in a whirl. Now when they go for a spin...
Taxi vlog number 27. Now, there's a gentleman's name on this car. It's Ford, and he said that history is bunk. What I want to do today is talk about history a little bit. See, about 100 years ago, you were lucky if you had a roof over your car or a windshield to protect you from the elements. And just driving the thing was complete entertainment. But around the time in the 1920s or so, somebody had the brilliant idea to bring entertainment into the car. Entertainment in the car has since somebody stuck a tube radio under his dash, entertainment in the car has been a big industry. And of course it was only AM, you know, you could just get AM radio. By the 40s, people were listening to the radio in their cars for news and to be entertained, or to hear a radio show, you know, that were broadcast through great big halls somewhere with a live audience and everything was live. Or it was in a sound booth. People were making dramas on the radio. Those things are fun to listen to even today. I have a few of them recorded somewhere. By the 50s, there were radios with signal-seeking systems that you'd push a button and they're really cool. Your needle would go across the dial by itself, and then when it found a signal, it would click on it. I had one of those in one of my cars way back, well, some years ago. And the thing worked when I first got it, but they were notorious for breaking. At one time, Oldsmobile, I think it was a 1959 option, had this radio that you could take out of the dash and take it with you, either to the beach or the picnic table or wherever you happen to be, so that you could hear the game. Well, anyhow, around that time, the late 50s, RCA and Chrysler Corporation developed a system called Highway Hi-Fi. And a Highway Hi-Fi was essentially a record player, like the one you'd give your teenager to play 45s on. But it played these 16.5 RPM records, produced, of course, by RCA. So RCA stood to sell some records, and Chrysler Corporation sold a few of these Highway Hi-Fi systems. And they were mounted on springs and stuff, so hopefully if you went over a bump, you know, it wouldn't skip too much. But the idea was if you're on the Eisenhower Interstate system, which was really smooth, you could listen to records of Elvis or anything else that came off the RCA label and was available in 16.5 RPM records. Naturally, the option didn't last too long. I think 2 or 3 years the whole idea fizzled out because people wanted to listen to things besides RCA records. They wanted to bring their own music along. And your own music naturally doesn't only come on one record label. When we got to the mid-60s or so, we had FM radio. It had better sound than AM. Another revolution in car entertainment came along, and this was the 8-track tape. Remember those? They're about that wide, about this long, about that thick. It was great. You could buy these tapes and they would just slide into a slot in your car radio or into your tape deck, which was usually mounted under the dash in those days. It was an add-on to your AM radio. And you could listen to anything you wanted. It was great. You could bring your own music along. If you were on a long drive through the prairies and there are no radio stations around, you could listen to whatever you chose. Great idea. The only trouble is storage. These things were big. They took up a lot of space, and if you wanted to bring all your music along, you know, you'd have to have a, well, the amount of music I listened to, I'd have to have a trunk full of 8-track tapes. And then, of course, when I wanted to play something different, I'd have to stop the car at a rest stop and find the next tape, unless I brought a smaller box into the car with me. I remember my aunt had one of those in her Ford station wagon. There's Ford again, history for you. Around the 1970s, another revolution came along. Things were really, you know, technology was really keeping pace. It was the cassette tape. It was about that wide, about that high, so thick, a lot smaller, a lot easier to carry than the 8-track tape. And they even had converters for converting your 8-track tape player slot into a cassette player. Pretty neat idea. Anyway, it was pretty standard by the late 70s. A lot of people had cassette decks in their car. And I remember I had one as recently as about 10 years ago. The only trouble with cassettes is they didn't deal very well with extremes in temperature and humidity. How many times has it happened to me that I would put a tape in that I wanted to hear, a favorite tape of something that I made off of some rare recording a friend of mine had, and I would put it in the tape deck and it would play, and as it would play, this little ribbon of tape would be coming out of the machine. Oh, horrible. A few years later, they came out with CDs, compact discs. Oh, that was another great idea. Perfect sound, digitally mastered, and you'd have a slot in your radio to put this thing in. I have one in my van. But you don't want to fumble with too many of these compact discs. So, you know, naturally it came along that in the 90s or so, you could get a CD changer system put in the trunk of your car. So, and you had a remote control from here, so you could choose what music you wanted, and the system in the trunk of the car would play. That was great. It worked really well. But you were limited to only how many discs you could bring. Oh, I got a call. I'll be back soon. So if you've watched a lot of my videos, you know I like to travel. And very often when you travel, you want to bring music along with you. I went and bought an iPod about 3 weeks ago, but I also got an attachment. And this is my latest electrical purchase. It's the perfect complement to my office, and I can take it with me anywhere I go. The iPod, as you know, is completely portable, and there it is right there. That's the iPod, and it has 8 gigs of music on it. That's about 1 week of continual play. And it lights up and it shows you what the music is on there. This other thing is a road trip attachment. I try and zoom in on that there. And I just set the frequency on the road trip attachment, and I set the same frequency on the car radio back there. Yeah, I set the same frequency on the car radio back there, 97.9 there, and 97.9 here, and the road trip transmits a signal from the iPod to the car radio, and it works. It's good for about 100 feet around the taxi. So if you're within 100 feet of me and you tune into 97.9, you can hear what's on my iPod. Isn't that neat? Now, if I rent a car or if I drive a different taxi, all I have to do is unplug it and bring it with me. So, you know, this is the answer. Any car that has a cigarette lighter receptacle and an FM radio, you can bring your music with you. Cool, eh? Well, that's the end of Taxi Vlog number 27. Have yourself a good one. I'm going on a trip. Bye.
Young Johnny Steele has an Oldsmobile. He loves a dear little girl. a whirl. Now when they go for a spin...
Not only does the road trip transmit the music to your radio, it keeps the iPod charged, so you don't have to go back and plug it into your computer repeatedly. It's pretty neat. You can go from one end of the country to the other without touching it and keep listening to your music.